Ireland, land of the lucky, potatoes, whiskey, and more potatoes. Today, Ireland is split into the Republic of Ireland to the south and Northern Ireland obviously to the north. But Northern Ireland is a semi-country controlled by the neighbouring UK, and it's this relationship with the UK that has given Ireland plenty of divisions. North versus South, Protestant versus Catholics, Unionist versus Nationalists. Through a long history of political disunity and foreign rule, Ireland has never once in thousands of years been both politically united and independent at the same time. Which raises the question, will Ireland ever unite? What is the future of the Emerald Isle? Of course, we should look at geography first. Ireland is clearly an island. Shouldn't that make it easier to unite? Islands tend to unite easier than most regions because they have the strongest borders around them, the sea. Well, there are certainly a lot of features to keep the Irish apart. Although Ireland has no insanely high mountains, it sure has a lot of them. On the small island, there are the McGillicuddy Reeks, the Comerags, the Blackstairs, the Wicklows, the Morns, and over 10 other mountain ranges. It is one hilly island creating pockets where different tribes could live. Cliffs and fjords on the west coast make it hard to put boats in the water, so the West's naval skill was always weaker, making it harder to unite. A large flat area in the middle of the island where growing crops is rather easy, but it wasn't for crop growing, it was made up of huge swaths of forest. That had to go, and ever since the Neolithic age, the inhabitants of Ireland had been clearing the forests to make all the fun stuff you can with wood, houses, boats, weapons. At the start of the 1900s, only 1% of the island was covered in forest. Nowadays, the number is more like 10.5%, but native forest cover still remains below 1%. This is where Ireland gets the name of the Emerald Isle, because the countryside is just so green without these trees. Ireland has a temperate oceanic climate, making it agriculture friendly. The Gulf Stream makes Ireland much warmer than it should be for a land at its latitude. The coasts remain warm, whereas in Labrador, at the same latitude, the coasts freeze over in winter. All of this makes Ireland's geography a fairly strong one, allowing for wide-scale agriculture, warm winters, and a fairly easily defendable land. Ireland's geography makes it a stable place to live, for the most part. It would be even more stable without their neighbours to the east, Great Britain and particularly England. The British geography is essentially the same as the Irish, but bigger, better for agriculture, and warmer, so when both regions were rising, the English could rise faster. But how do places unite? How do you take a geographic region and unite it politically? Because for the far majority of human history, we lived in small clans and tribes, never really expanding to create an empire. It wasn't until the agricultural revolution where humans finally sat in one place and started making these unified societies. But even then, whenever a great empire fell, it would create a mess of tiny states fighting for control of their regions. By far the easiest way to unite a region is for one state to rise up and conquer the rest. It happened with Macedon in Greece, Prussia in Germany, Piedmont in Italy, Tokugawa in Japan, and Rome in the entire Mediterranean. There are a few reasons this never happened in Ireland. Firstly, the Romans never conquered the island. The Romans were masters at unifying entire regions under their rule, so once the Western Roman Empire fell, the regions which could realistically unify had much more incentive to, already used to the administration of a great empire. Secondly, even though Ireland was never politically unified, they still had a great amount of cultural and legal unity. An Irish High King existed overseeing the island as a whole, above the kings who ruled the Irish kingdoms. Irish society wasn't a typical feudal one. It was built from the bottom up with many clans or tuatha throughout Ireland. Each king or ri-tuaithi would control a tuath, with higher kings above them a ruri. Another king called a cúige or fifth would control about a fifth of Ireland, and the high king, the ard ri, was on top. The Brehon laws were administered throughout all of Ireland with this system, culturally unifying the island, but the real power came from the ruri, and the High King did not have much control over the entire island. The third reason is because of their neighbours. With a bigger, better geography also being an island, England always had more resources and a better navy than Ireland to defend its own island, so two things could happen. Either England, bored of their island, projects power outwards in easy stop being in Ireland, or someone with a better navy than England conquers it, taking Ireland as a bonus. The latter happened after the Norman invasion of England. The Norman conquest of Ireland changed the island forever. English King Henry II declared himself Lord of Ireland, controlling most of the island, and the lordship continued until the Black Death, where Norman settlements slowed down, allowing them to be Gaelicized. English authority pretty much stopped outside of the Pale until the Tudor conquest of Ireland. This time it's the English projecting power outward. It resulted in the island's population halving from the war, the religious disunity and unrest, English plantations anglicizing and colonizing Ireland, especially in the north for their agricultural supply, and for the first time ever, Ireland was united, although under English rule. Mistreatment by the British, especially during the Great Potato Famine, caused Irish nationalism to boom among the Catholics. As a result of a revolutionary period and the IRA, the Catholic parts of Ireland became free in 1921 and actually independent in 1949, but they forgot a big chunk of the island to the north, which had some troubles in the 60s and nearly joined Ireland. To this day, Ireland has still not been unified. Now, there are 2 islands on this planet instead of the one that the Earth made for us. Is there any progress on unifying the island? For the most part, Protestants in the north are unionist, with 93% wishing to stay, whereas only 47% of Catholics identify as unionist. 32% of Catholics want a united Ireland, which translates to 70% of the Northern Irish population wishing to stay with the UK, and 14% wanting to leave for Ireland. That's a fairly significant majority who wants to stay in the Union, but there's something big that has the ability to change that, and it rhymes with Schmegshit and the Schmirish border. The majority of Northern Irish had voted to remain in the EU, not to the margin where Scotland was, but 10% more voted to remain rather than leave. It's still up in the air whether the border will be a hard border or not, but it will still be there. Both countries in the Schengen area made the island essentially one to travel across, but now who knows what that'll be like. In the event of a hard border, there could be backlash on the northern side, having harder access to the south where resources and jobs could be. Another reason for unification is the decline of religion in Ireland. Ever since World War I and II, religion has steadily been declining in Europe, and even though Ireland didn't see any major combat on it, it is still part of the trend. In 1973, 91% of Irish attended church weekly. That number shrunk to 45% in 2008, halving the amount of churchgoers. Today that number is somewhere between 30 and 35%, and daily mass attendance is 3%. And sorry for the last statistic, but 44% of the Irish population do not consider themselves religious. At its core, the divide between the 2 islands was a religious divide between Protestants and Catholics of the island. If that religion is slowly going away, or at least shrinking, will that mean Irish nationalism can take over? The question for the North is, should they join Ireland? What does Ireland have going for it? The Republic of Ireland is a very small country having a population of 4.9 million. It's unlikely that Ireland will be too relevant on the world stage. Making up for that, it has a very advanced economy with a GDP of $500 billion US, or about $100,000 per capita. From the 90s to 2009, Ireland went through a period of growth called the Celtic Tiger, where low taxation, pro-business policies, joining the Eurozone, and a young workforce attracted many multinational corporations to do business in Ireland. But much like Southern Europe, Ireland was hit hard during the 2009 financial recession, being one of the most indebted EU nations, stopping this insane growth. What they do have with the huge amount of wealth acquired is one of the most comfortable countries on earth. The nation ranked second worldwide in the Human Development Index in 2020, only behind Norway. A strong healthcare system gives them a very high life expectancy of around 82 years, and 83% of Irish adults have some sort of post-secondary education, adding to its advanced economy. Demographically, Ireland's population is fairly stable. Yes, the Irish birth rate is declining, but the birth rate is actually one of the highest in the EU, creating a fair pool of young workers. And with it, their population will stay fairly stable. It's expected that around 2050 it'll hit around 5.5 million inhabitants and stay there for decades. That doesn't mean they don't have a population problem. Ever since the Great Potato Famine, where 1 million Irish starved to death and many more left, Ireland's population has never recovered and is never expected to. Between 1841 and 1921, the Irish population was cut in half from 8 million to 4 million. Many of them leaving for a better life in the Americas or Australia. If it seems like Americans celebrate St. Patrick's Day harder than the Irish, it might be because there are about 35 million more people with Irish heritage in the USA than Ireland. But through migration, particularly from Eastern European countries, making up 10% of the Irish population, and only a semi-declining population, Ireland will be able to grow and keep a stable population. Ireland is a unique country. It is a region on Earth which has never been united and independent throughout its entire history. Its geography meant that during the classical and medieval ages, the Irish people couldn't unite as they didn't have the technology or nationalism to conquer the mountains. Their neighbors' geography meant that no matter how good the Irish Navy was, there would always be a better navy right beside it. And it's that better navy that twice throughout history controlled Ireland, whether it be the Normans or the British. When independence was finally given, the Protestant North stuck with the British, disuniting the island once again, but with Brexit, declining religiosity, and a Southern Ireland which is more comfortable and has a more stable population than the UK, it's unclear where the North will go. Ireland has two clear futures ahead of it, one where it unites and one where it doesn't. Northern Ireland needs to make a decision, remain loyal to the Union, or, after thousands of years, create a unified Ireland. Since you watched this whole video, you probably like these types of videos. If you do, check out State of the World. He covers videos on geopolitics, and his link is in the description. Thanks for watching this whole video, and don't forget to subscribe.